Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Keeping Her Keys podcast. In this episode, I am going to be journeying into Hecate's cave, discussing the history and mystery of returning to this primordial cave of the goddess. We live in a time when Hecate is emerging in pop culture, and also when Hecate is very present in our internal world. We see images of a dark figure, a woman in our dreams that is compelling us to go on a journey. We have her on our minds, and we can feel a call deep within our souls that is about the kindling of her torch within us. And that torch of hers really is our soul flame. And what's going on now is that our society is at a cracking point, that Hecate is emerging from this crack of this carefully constructed container that was put by the patriarchy around the great goddess, around the great mother, in all of her fullness. What we've been experiencing is this huge cosmic shift where the great mother, by Hecate, by Kali, by Ishtar, Black Tara, she has many different names, but it is the goddess re-emerging on a planetary, on a universal level in her full form. And that includes both the solar aspects, for ascension and going into the intellect and so on. And it also brings back with it the primordial need to return to her womb, which is symbolized in the cave. And the womb has been so removed from our vocabulary. The sacred feminine has been so reviled. And when the sacred feminine is allowed to break free, she is very much reduced to a figure that is only kind of benevolent, disempowered, healing, but not, she's not strong. She's not outspoken. She's not assertive. She's not angry. She's all of these things that the gender stereotypes about women say that women can't be. Yet the great mother, the goddess, is all of those things. She is darkness. She is light. She is anima mundi, the soul of the world. And why Hecate is emerging so much through these cracks in the patriarchy is that it is a necessary correction, because we need the darkness. The universe is both dark and light. And we've been living in an era of artificial light. We're staring at those screens all the time, on the endless scroll on social media, watching the television, lighting up the planet with an excessive and unsustainable amount of artificial light. There's been so much artificial light, and the goddess in her full form is returning to say, you need the dark. You will destroy yourselves if you don't have my healing darkness. That is a return to the womb, a return to a connection to the green world, to the deeper world, to instinct and intuition and emotion. That too much rational thought, structure, rigidity, too much, top-down order. The goddess is saying, there is a place and a time for power over, but I represent power with. So we are living in this very tumultuous time. Certainly the pandemic has taught us that. And the pandemic, has brought us all back home. It's brought us all back to our own safe place. Hopefully your home is a safe place for you. And this is the medicine of the great mother. that we need to return home. And our spiritual home, the depths of our spiritual home are the cave. And so that's why the pull of the cave of the goddess is so strong, like on a global scale right now. And it's also really awakening within us the need for this journey through the darkness to our wholeness. It's a return to the womb from whence we came. And, it's one of those things that's so curious about our modern studies and experiences of the goddess that when we need to discuss goddesses like Hekate or Kali or Ishtar, they often have this label of the dark goddess or the dark mother slapped on them, when in fact they are the totality of the goddess, both dark and light. But because they do embrace and bring us into the healing darkness, that, there's this need to say, oh, they're dark. And when we look at the history of Hecate, who the earliest historical records we have clearly indicate that she was a great goddess figure. And as patriarchy grew in a certain way throughout the ancient Mediterranean, she was reduced in her powers to just being associated with the underworld, ghosts and spirits, witchcraft, and so on. Yet she still abided as this great mother. It doesn't matter what, men sitting with their tablets scribbling down stories say. Hecate is an anima mundi face, the same as these other powerful ancient goddesses. And, they had this whole tight container around them that's now finally, there's cracks and they're coming out. They're coming out in the global scale, and they're coming out in our private lives as an antidote, to the true infection of our times, which is this obsession with artificial light that only causes fear. You stare at any artificial light too long, you get into that trap of fear. So that trap of fear, that anxiety, that depression that we're feeling is like it's a sign, it's an invitation to go into our own internal cave, travel in through ourselves, heal the shadow, go all the way into our soul, through which we can connect with the deeper world. And that is the only way as individuals we can achieve wholeness, that we can heal from our past trauma and hurts. And it is the only way that our planet will ever heal. And so Anima Mundi is the feminine soul of the world. And when we do our inner work on ourselves, we are healing the whole planet. We are healing the collective by choosing to go on the journey where we're no longer fractalized. We're no longer living in constant anxiety and depression, because that is, that is the sickness of our times, is this constant, continual fear mongering through the media, through our screens, through the artificial light, to keep us, enchanted with fear, so that we remain dependent upon consumerism and pharmaceuticals and so on, when what we really need is to get into ourselves and to realize that the great goddess abides within us, and her torch light is that's the burning of our soul, saying, come back to me, come back to what nourishes you on the deeper level, facing your fears, facing the shadow, and understanding your totality. That is the journey of returning to Hecate's cave. So this journey does require cord cutting, which is dissociating from this collective Christian patriarchy based on consumerism and pharmaceuticals. It's a huge undertaking to go through this kind of deprogramming. My teaching and writing really focuses on this, and I encourage you, to join my private network, the Keeping Your Keys Coven of Hecate, where I offer medicine for the times we live in, and medicine that will help you on your own journey of healing into your unique wholeness. There's so much in there that is designed to support you in our safe and completely private community where there's no algorithms and no one can look and see what you're doing. And my teachings really focus on merging my 20 years plus training and experience as a psychologist with my studies and experience as a spiritual teacher with ancient wisdom, really focusing on the great mother goddess as Hekate and as Anima Mundi, the very soul of the world. So I encourage you to check out, the private network that you can get by downloading the Mighty Networks app and looking up Keeping Her Keys, or going to keepingherkeys.com /join. So what is this primordial power of the cave? Like, why do we feel something within us that is dark and welcoming and embracing? And we're intimidated by it for sure, but it's this kind of fake fear we have of healing darkness and this belief that all darkness is bad. To the ancients, the dark and the light, the day and the night, both held their problems. There was terrors of the night for certain, but there were also so many terrors of the day. And, it has been the vilification of what is dark, the dark goddess, and so on. And we get into a big, complicated discussion about, people who are not white skinned, obviously being lumped into that whole thing. And so part of the healing from this fixation with whiteness and lightness is this thing that you're feeling in your belly. And you feel it in your belly, you feel it in your root, because that is the part of our body that is connected to the underworld and the cave. And it is about the belly, the womb, that location of the body, that's the root. It's about intuition, it's about rewilding, it's about going inwards all the way till you get back to your instincts and your wild true self. That we feel that thing, that rumbling in our belly, that gut instinct. Um, and this territory of the belly, and understanding that this is where we need to go for healing. This is where we receive the medicine of the numinous, of the goddess. This goes back thousands and thousands of years and across cultures. I'm just going to read a little bit from a book that does a fantastic historical overview of the Great Mother. It's several decades old, so it is a little bit out of sync for how we see things in 2020, but there is such great research and insight from the amazing Eric Newman, who was a student of Jung and a physician and just an amazing writer and theorist about the Great Mother. So this is a little passage from this book. We begin with the territory of the belly, which most strikingly represents the elementary containing character of the vessel. To it belongs the womb as symbol to the entrance into this region. The lower level of this belly zone is the underworld that is contained in the belly or the womb of the earth. To this world belong not only the subterranean darkness as hell and night, but also such symbols as chasm, cave, abyss, valley, depths, which in innumerable rites and myths play the part of the earth womb that demands to be fructified. The cave, in its relation to the mountain that unites the character of the vessel, belly and earth, also belongs to the dark territory of the underworld. Rock and stone has the same significance as mountain and earth. Accordingly, it is not only the mountain that is worshipped as the Great Mother, but also the rocks representing it and her. So in this passage, Newman is talking specifically about ancient representations of the goddess carved in stone. So there are many representations of Hekate, for example, like this, whether it's statuary or if it's little magical gems with her being represented on them through her symbols, and through, images of her as well. We see this in antiquity, this need to connect to stone, that stone is medicine. And we see it now. Look at the popularity of crystals. So this affection and affiliation we often feel with stone spirits through our crystals, that's the cave calling us, right? The cave is saying, I am where the riches are. I have the minerals. And that is symbolic of our own journey back into ourselves, deep into ourselves, past the thinking mind, even down through the active heart and into that intuitive, deepest stretch of ourselves, way down into our belly. And the cave is not the whole totality of the underworld. The cave is the womb, it's the sacred chamber where the feminine abides, where the healing abides. And, returning to Hecate's cave is not merely about women healing, because the masculine in our society needs to heal as well. And so this cave is open for all. The cave of the goddess is both birthing room and crypt. And we see this in Hecate's ancient epithets as Aletheia, associated with there was a separate goddess known as Aletheia, but it's an epithet of Hecate and Artemis and others as well that indicates the archetype of the midwife, she who brings life into the world. And then there are many epithets, which are ancient titles of Hecate and other goddesses, that are associated with bringing death, such as Anassa Eneroi, the death queen, which is an epithet of Persephone, and Thanatigos, which is an epithet of Hecate, that comes to us from these ancients who understood that the Great Mother was vast and encompassed all of her creation, lightness and dark, happiness and sadness, all of these things. And what we have here in a societal level is a lot of programming about not only denying the totality of the Great Mother, it's also about denying anima, the sacred feminine that lives within all of us, whatever gender we identify with. So this is the archetypal feminine that is very much about the root and the belly, intuition, instinct, rewilding, getting back connected to nature, turning towards the inner life. It's lunar, the womb is connected with the moon. Hecate is connected with the moon as well, and many other goddesses. And that refers to interior life. And here during the pandemic, interior life has just been offered to us as this huge invitation, because so many of us are in quarantine, and that we're in our homes. And so it's an opportunity to turn off the artificial light and go within and really explore the Great Mother figure, in her totality. And I'm going to read another quote from the Great Mother because I love this one, because even though he wrote this book, I think it was over 60 years ago now, that he's talking about understanding the goddess in her totality. Thus, when she is angry, the goddess as Demeter or Ishtar or Hathor or Hecate can close the wombs of living creatures and all life stands still. Doesn't that sound like 2020? Artificial life has stood still in many ways, right? But the green world has gone on. As good mother, she is the mistress of the east gate, the gate of birth. As terrible mother, she is mistress of the west gate, the gate of death. She, the engulfing entrance to the underworld, the gate, the door, the gully, the ravine, the abyss, are symbols of the feminine earth womb. They are the numinous places that mark the road into the mystical darkness of the underworld. So here we are, having to socially isolate when we don't there's not a necessity to be out in the world, and what an opportunity it is for us to awaken to Hecate's cave within us. So it is a process of overcoming this great fear that we've been programmed to have of the dark, of understanding the Great Mother in her totality. And the journey into the cave really does require so much bravery. Um, and although, it can be very intimidating, there's also a necessity. If you feel the pull to this kind of deeper healing, that you want to confront the shadow and understand what your shadow has to teach you, and then release the shadow. If you are in the place in your life where you are ready to call back the missing pieces of your soul, first of all, you have to, release the burden that you've been carrying. You have to bring death to what's been keeping you from calling back those pieces of your soul that you've been missing. And then you're ready for this rebirth in her cave, where you are born into your wholeness, where, the shadow wisdom becomes part of you and you've released the burdens that you don't need to carry. And that this is all woven anew deep in Hecate's cave. And we see this symbolic ritual of descending down through the cave. We see it in so many places throughout historical records of ancient rites. And perhaps the most poignant one involving Hecate is the story of Persephone. So Persephone's story is that she was Kore, the maiden, the innocent maiden, who was violated by Hades, lord of the underworld. And she was very bereft. She didn't want to face her shadow. She didn't want to have that union. If we think of the lover's card in tarot, for example, which is sometimes about the outer union with a romantic partner, but it's oftentimes about the union of ourselves with our darkness and our light. She didn't want to face that union, that lover's card, which in a mythic way is represented by Hades violating her. It's that abyss that opens up when we don't attend to our darkness. Our darkness will come and attack us. This psyche will have its way with us. It will keep pulling us into the abyss so that we will have this opportunity to heal into wholeness. So at this part of the myth, what we're seeing is this retelling of the union of darkness and wholeness, and also of anima with animus, the male principle with the female principle, the dark and the light. And she doesn't want any of that. And perhaps you can relate to this, that, when you have been confronted with the darkness, you don't want to accept it. You want to avoid it. It leaves you brokenhearted, and you don't want to travel into it. You want to just be like, nope, I'm brokenhearted and I don't want to deny that it's happened. I want to blame other people and so on. So I can certainly relate to this, and perhaps you can too. So she is bereft, and Hecate comes to her. Hecate emerges out of her cave to come to her at this point and offers her succor, and goes on in this mythic cycle to become her guardian, her guide, mediator, counselor, and so on. And Demeter, in this retelling of the Persephone myth, in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, Demeter kind of loses it. She is the aspect of Kore that's saying, I don't want any of this. I want to just stay in the light. I want to be the outer self. I don't want to go inward into this journey of healing and, accepting and the descent. I want to just be out here. So a lot of times in the interpretation of the myth, that is what we see the difference between Persephone and Demeter. In this way, Persephone representing the inner self, the inner journey into the cave, into the underworld, and Demeter representing the solar principle, the outer self. We can see this kind of the two halves of ourselves, that we are interior and we are exterior. And then Hecate is very much the soul. She's the mediating force between our outer self and our inner self, our personas that we project out into the world and who we are inside. She's the force that weaves it together so that we ourselves become this kind of triple goddess. However we identify with gender, it is about this journey of wholeness that's demonstrated by the Persephone myth. So of course, Persephone goes on to become Anassa Eneroi, queen of the underworld, um, who rules over all the subterranean, and journeys back through the cave to the upper world each year in an agricultural sense, spinning the seasons, turning the wheel of time, and that Hecate is the great mediator who is making this all happen, just like that soul fire within us that's making us turn inward, that's making us um, creative, making us pursuing healing and so on. She's that force that's compelling us and guiding us to do the things necessary for regeneration, such as Persephone coming back up to the upper world and moving back into her exterior self in the spring, and then descending again. And this reminds us that, the dark and the light are necessary. Our ascension, our expansion, the outer self and our persona are so important, but they're no more vital than the inner self and going within and doing those things that we need. That is the natural cycle. And we have really been kind of seduced into this belief that the dark is bad, that dark goddesses are scary, that Hecate is off limits and associated with, really scary things like demons and so on. When we peel back this veneer that's been placed around Hecate and all of the goddesses, we see that they are about the natural cycle, which is both creation and destruction. But fundamentally, it is an arc towards growth and regeneration. It's about being able to release our burdens to the goddess so that they are recycled and made new. We don't need to hold these burdens. And that is where, we begin to get into the medicine of Hecate's cave. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Keeping Her Keys podcast. The rituals of the sacred cave are my teachings around the medicine of Hecate's cave. And I'm going to link to where you can find each of the meditations in the notes for this episode. So if you are feeling the call to go deeper into your own healing through darkness to wholeness, I have made those available in versions that are suitable for anybody in the public to do them. If you're in the Keeping Her Keys coven, these are our 3 foundational rituals that we observe at different parts of the year corresponding. So we do the death walking ritual of release in November. And then in February, we call back missing pieces of our soul through a journey then as the wheel of the year turns to the very beginnings, the very roots of new life. And then in late spring, we go through the cauldron of rebirth ceremony. So you can go deeper into the rituals by joining the coven. And if you really want a deep journey of healing through Hecate's cave, I teach a course called Lampadia. That's a term that refers to Hecate as the torchbearer, the eternal flame that burns within, that you can take. And that course starts each November.